story for Hollywood.
Hooray
That's
for
Screwy Bally
Hollywood.
Hooly Hollywood. Where any office boy or young mechanic can be a panic with just a good-looking pan. To be an actor, see Mr. Factor. He'll make your kisser look good, by God. The rest of you, not so much. Anyway, hello,
So
Vash.
fantastic, Lou. Hello there, Lou, and ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, I do apologize. Welcome to Hollywood Backlot with Lou and you. My name is VashSky,
you
your
always
host.
say that without the children of all ages part. Is that a reflection on our audience, or?
Oh well, that's interesting.
It's more of a circus thing, I guess, than a movie thing. But
I always take it off of the the introductory line for all the recordings, or at least what used to be at the Disney parks back in the day. Now it's Friends. Not so good. Not so good.
Only Friends would pay that much money to be there, I guess, is what they're trying to say in a subtle way.
That's a good point right there. Speaking of Friends paying to see things, here we go. We got a little bit of box office news. I was kind of like starting it out a little bit with this because the box office numbers hit right about the time we go live, so that's cool. Luis Fernando, Wicked, crossed the 150 million mark at global box office after coming on top of industry projections overseas with a $50.2 million 5-day opening over 61 markets, with several major ones yet to join. Allied to its $114 million 3-day weekend in the U.S. box office, Wicked hits a $164.2 million global opening at the BO. Lou, what do you think? Are you going to go see Wicked there?
First of all, no. It's just not my kind of thing, and that's not a mark on the movie one way or the other. Second of all, I think they better... What was that line that Louis Jourdan has in Octopussy where he says, "I suggest you spend it quickly, Mr. Bond." I don't know how many weeks this is going to, last out is the question.
Yeah.
I suspect fewer. I've seen nothing in the reviews that would make Dad go along too. That would have made a difference. That would have turned every party of 2 into 3 and 3 into 4 and all of that.
Right.
I think Dad's going to take him and drop him off and go have a beer, and good for him. So,
I think so. I think there might be rewatchability from a certain segment of the market for sure. The question is that going to translate worldwide? Yeah, it's the biggest question for me. 160 million. It's nothing to sneeze at, but you would have thought it was higher given the amount.
What I don't know is, I suppose that the show, having been around for 20 years, has made it to, at least England and a few other places, as far as the stage show. So therefore building an audience or not, depending on how they reacted. What I don't know is The Wizard of Oz, the subject in general, that big a deal anywhere in the world anymore or not? And I have no idea. But if it isn't, that automatically cuts into the audience for this. So, I don't know if the old movie runs on TV in Brazil or Pakistan or wherever. But if not, it lessens the overall appeal. We shall see. I think making a two-parter out of it was probably going to turn out to be a big mistake, because if everybody gets their fill from the one and then says, "Wait a minute, I got to come back in a year and do this all again," there's only so many theater kids and their moms out there to draw on. So we shall see.
That's true. We should definitely see for sure. But we're here not to talk about Wicked and Ariana Grande and Cynthia Erivo and all that jazz, but we're here to talk about some classic stars, specifically the ones attached to the golden age of Hollywood via a book that Lou actually read here, The Star Machine by Jeanine Basinger, I believe is how you say that. And apparently a fascinating little tale about how the studio system back during the golden age not only produced stars but produced star pictures and so forth in order to produce the hundreds of films that they would produce a year. Lou?
Well, what the book shows, and I haven't quite finished it yet, but it's really good, so I wanted everybody to know that the stars, not the movies, were the product being created. The assembly line had the scouts out there looking for the kid who wins the beauty contest in Peoria or wherever. And then they had this entire process of signing them to a limited contract to begin with, putting them to school as far as learning how to act, as they say, for the screen, which is a different skill than acting on the stage. Also, details like teaching them how to ride and how to shoot and how to fence and how to do all those things that movie stars do. But then it was about planting stories, putting them in minor roles in major movies, and basically giving the audience a taste and an interest. And of course, the press side of it, rewriting their biographies if there were unsavory things that needed to be left out or more interesting things they could invent. Obviously, fixing any cosmetic issues as far as bobbing their ears or cutting their hair a different way or giving them new teeth or a new nose or whatever it happened to be. And every step along that route was intended to get them into a big movie with big stars in a minor role to see if the audiences noticed or liked them or how they played off against the established stars. And if they did well, they moved up. And if they didn't, they were left behind. And then, of course, at some stage along there, if they had enough confidence in the product, meaning the person, they signed them to the infamous 7-year contracts. Why infamous? Well, basically you were selling yourself to them for lots of money and lots of hard work. And if you disobeyed or did something they didn't like, for example, they would put you in whatever picture they wanted to put you in. And if you thought that part was wrong for you or something you didn't want to do and said no, they said, okay, fine, you're on suspension, which meant for the run of when you would have been employed during that picture, you weren't working at all, and therefore you weren't getting paid. And furthermore, let's say that took a month or 2 months, then that month or 2 months got stuck on the end of the 7-year contract. And some of these 7-year contracts could wind up being 9 or 10 years long by that process. And until a couple of prominent stars, most notably Olivia de Havilland, fought against that and won, that's the way it was. So that was the gamble you made. I saw one quote in this book from Mickey Rooney. He said, look, I was on street corners dancing for nickels, and they suddenly wanted to give me $150 a week. I was suddenly rich. So of course I went along with it. You know, I knew what it meant. But heck, money is a convincing factor when it's steady and regular and guaranteed. And plus, of course, they did your clothes, they did your hair, they did. If you needed a loan to buy a house in LA, don't bother with those messy banks. The studio will make you a loan at a very good rate because the more they could control you, the more they liked it. They didn't like it, for example, if you decided to fall in love and get married with somebody they hadn't approved first, especially if you were a romantic lead man or woman, because you were supposed to be, you know, in their mind's eye available to all the fans out there. And if they were happily married, that wasn't the truth. So anyway, the book goes into it in much, much more detail than I can give here. But it's, if you want to know how things really were, read this. And I would also suggest when reading this, assuming you're getting it, well, maybe you'll buy the book physically too, that's fine. But if you're watching it on a Kindle or on your computer to read it, keep another tab open, something you never have to tell Vash to do because he always has 1,200. But keep another tab open and start looking up the people and the movies that she refers to, because you may think you know who these people are, but not until you put the picture with the name and the scene with the moment. And it's handy to have the ability to read a book this way nowadays, as opposed to the old just read the book and remember, if you can, the movie in question. Anyway, I highly recommend this. She's written several other books about the biz. It may be a little kind of an overkill book in the sense that she takes various people and takes you through their story. And after a while, it's like, okay, I got that. Next. But still worth reading. Still worth reading.
Yes, absolutely. This studio system is super interesting because obviously it's it's a relic of the past, although there are still signs of it in, I guess, modern filmmaking. But it's quite interesting how the dynamic has shifted there from not quite the movies being the product, but actually the stars being the product that the movies would obviously showcase, and it does definitely tell of a different relationship, let's say, that studios had with their stars, and how they had to have them under contract and strict regulation in order to protect their products. So really,
yeah, exactly, and especially when they were starting out, picking the roles that they would be in. They talk about, I'm trying to think who it is they mentioned. I think it's Tyrone Power, that he was A, gorgeous, and therefore B, instantly material for the process. But that he could play, they said there was a little bit of kind of dangerous smartass on the edge of his character. And it came through the camera, and therefore they picked roles that were, at the beginning, that were basically about, that's a beautiful guy, and let's put him in a romantic situation. But every one of them had a little bit of an edge to it, and that's what made him attractive, more than just another pretty face, as they say. And everybody you've ever heard of is mentioned in here, and it's pretty interesting stuff.
Yeah, Jeanine actually appeared on a podcast back in August 22nd of 2023 talking about this book in particular. Really fascinating insights from her, and her viewpoints and her perspectives coming out of basically being an usher for many years, having seen thousands and thousands of movies, really loving the reaction she would see from guests in the audience to films and so forth. And she talks about like how stars coming into the business would have like report cards generated by the studio, and they would go into like what strengths, weaknesses, particular characteristics about them, like how willing they were in order to fulfill certain roles, or to actually be on contract and actually do what the studio actually wanted them to do. Very fascinating stuff. I mean, it's obviously, I'm sure studios do have profiles on all actors, but actual report cards, that's really something.
Oh yeah. Well, it was a business, and they had a whole process, and like they said, they were manufacturing stars. So
I'll put a link to this podcast specifically in the chat. You can actually hear it for yourselves. Very fascinating individual for sure. She talks about how she, like when she was 3 years old, I guess Gone with the Wind had come out, in 1939, and she wasn't able to see it because I guess her parents left her back home, and so like for her entire career, basically, she's been chasing Gone with the Wind and really trying to get into the mind and psyche of Hollywood through that. Very, very cool. She talks about contemporary films and how like films of the past were made for everybody and took an audience mindset when creating those films, whereas films of the day, you have almost an observational role for the audience. They're a little bit disconnected. They're not as immersed into whatever they're seeing. Follows the era of television. Just a fascinating conversation. Honestly, it's a really good listen. I recommend everybody to do that. Get the book, why don't you, as well. There's an article talking about this a little bit that I wanted to bring up, and Lou, feel free to interject whenever you wish.
I feel free. I'm free. Anyway.
From the New York Times, when the studio is called The Shots and the Close-Ups. This features Jeanine and by William Grimes here. Correction appended on the roll call of names that made Hollywood shine in its golden age. Dennis Morgan comes well down the list, yet Morgan, a vaguely handsome leading man with a pleasant 10-year voice, generated solid box office returns from the mid-1930s right through the 1940s. Although overshadowed by the Gables and the Garbos, he was a star of medium magnitude with his own assured place in the entertainment universe.
Who, by the way, constantly played Irish guys and was in fact Swedish. But anyway, I mean, his back.
That's Hollywood, baby. It's all in the movies. As Jeanine Basinger amply demonstrates in The Star Machine, Hollywood excelled at manufacturing Dennis Morgans. There was nothing accidental about his career or those of 100 other names that are only answers to trivia questions. Hollywood needed more than great headliners to satisfy the insatiable appetite for the hundreds of motion pictures that it made per year. There were big name stars and little name stars. Miss Basinger writes, A-list stars, B-list stars, male stars, female stars, dog stars, we've talked about that before, child stars.
Sirius is the dog star.
Yes.
Anyway.
Character actor stars, western stars for low-budget westerns, horror film stars for horror films, and always waiting in the wings to step in when the established stars got too uppity, were youngsters under consideration to become the next big stars. In other words, Hollywood needed Cary Grant and Katharine Hepburn, but it also needed its Priscilla Lanes and its George Brents. What do you think about that? What does the book have to say about any of that?
Well, it says all of that. Indeed, it does. And you have to also remember all of this was happening in that magical time when everybody was under contract and they were cranking out so many movies, the A's and the B's, because they had the theaters out there to take them, whether they liked it or not. Yes. And there's nothing wrong with a good B picture, but a good one is less likely to happen because lesser people are involved in making it, and it's more likely to be a retread, of something more famous. Let's do that, but with these guys, and we can do it again and again and again. So, anyway,
absolutely. Miss Basinger, the author of Silent Stars and the chairwoman of the Film Studies Department at Wesleyan University, ingeniously picks apart the gears and levers of the machine, analyzing the careers of a handful of stars whose ups and downs illustrate the studio system at its smooth functioning best, or reveal its hidden inefficiencies. The same system that could extract a long, profitable career from a middle-level talent like Clifton Webb could also stumble badly, as it did in trying to make a second Garbo out of the now forgotten Anna Sten.
Yep.
The machine depended ultimately on wayward human beings and on the X factor known as star quality, whose power everyone recognized, but whose properties remain a mystery. Hollywood, as Miss Basinger points out, quote, cheerfully made a living manufacturing a product it couldn't define.
Except they knew it when it paid off, so that was the
yes, yeah.
That was the measure of it. So anyway, go read it if you're interested in this sort of thing. And I'm thinking we should move on to another topic, because this one we could talk about all day long, and that would all just be quoting her book, really, at this stage. So read the book. You saw the movie, read the book, as they used to say. Or we could go to our little musical insert if you'd like.
Yes.
As you may know, for the last couple of weeks, we've begun a new tradition here on the show where we have a thing we call, what is it we're calling? LEW'S Backlot JUKEBOX? Something like that. Where I discovered that because YouTube is so persnickety about what you can and cannot play on the show, it's hard to share with you the good music that comes from so many movies and that I enjoy personally, and that may have some historical curiosity like this week's does. But we can give you a link to said music, and I will say up front that most of these links are going to a guy on YouTube named Fred, who does soundtrack suites. He goes through and pulls the original tracks and other tracks and puts together about 10 to 15 minute long suites based on the movie music of a particular movie. Since last time, we went with two scores, one that was by a very famous composer, Henry Mancini, but rejected by the director after it was done and then replaced. This week, we have an even more curious. Here, let me ask you an ultimate trivia question. What do the following people have in common? Ready? John Wayne, well, that's something right there. John Wayne, and who else did we figure out had a connection to this? In a way, Paul Frees. In a way, Tony the Tiger. You never thought John Wayne and Tony the Tiger. Robert Mitchum. Who else did we decide was part of this? Well, there were a few others, but Frank Sinatra. So what do all those people have in common? Well, the score of our next jukebox choice, which is the score to the movie El Dorado. Now, you've probably seen El Dorado. It's a great Western with these two guys in it. And the music is by Nelson Riddle. Well, Nelson Riddle also was a major arranger for Sinatra. That's how he got on the list. But more importantly, this is one of those Westerns with a ballad with words at the beginning. And it's sung with the accompaniment of the guy named George Alexander is the main singer. And frankly, he's not very good. If you listen closely, he's kind of flat and sharp a few places. But backing him up is that amazing group, the MELLOWMEN. And if any of you out there know who the MELLOWMEN was, that was THURL RAVENSCROFT's quartet. And THURL RAVENSCROFT, of course, is the voice of Tony Tiger and the voice of the lead singer in The Haunted Mansion, hence Paul Frees, and the guy with the big, deep voice of those statues singing in the grand finale. Grinning Ghosts to the Duke in one fell swoop, I guess you could call it. But anyway, it's a great score from Nelson Riddle, who also, he did lots of interesting scores, but like I say, notably, he composed and scored and arranged for Frank Sinatra quite a bit. He was famous for muted trumpets. If you listen to all those great Sinatra songs with the muted trumpet intros, 9 times out of 10, it's Nelson Riddle. But anyway, this is a fun score, and Vash will give you the link, and you can listen sometime when you're in the mood for some great movie music with a 6 degrees of separation from Disney in it, in the form of THURL and the MELLOWMEN. They're
Yes.
there. In fact, that's THURL over there on the far left.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. THURL did a number of voices, actually, for the early era of Disneyland, having starred in a couple of things like the Enchanted Tiki Room, for instance, and also probably his more famous work being that you actually can see him on one of the busts there in the Haunted Mansion graveyard scene.
Yep.
Very, very cool. Also, too, Paul Frees, he has an association here, not only as Master Gracie or the narrator for
Your
the
ghost
Mansion.
host.
Yes.
And a connection to me because my mother worked with him in radio way back when.
Whoa.
There was a Hollywood gossip show, not the two big ones, Luella Parsons and, but this was a woman called Una Munson, who was some kind of bargain basement Hollywood gossip columnist, and she had a show, Una Munson's Hollywood, and it was sponsored by a product that was kind of the precursor of V8. It was called Ever Ready Vegetable Juice Cocktail. And once a week, my mother and Paul Frees would go to the studio to do the commercial where she'd say something like, "I'm Miss Celery," and he'd say, "I'm Mr. Tomato," and she'd say, "And I'm Miss Radish," with a different voice, and he'd say, "I'm Mr. Pick another vegetable." And we get together with X number of other vegetables to make Ever Ready cocktail juice. So there you go. Full circle. And
So
little
good.
did you know at that time that someday her son would be telling stories about it. And by the way, she just had her 97th birthday this past week. So happy birthday, Mom.
Congratulations.
And there
That's
you go.
awesome. That is great. That is fantastic. I know you had to leave 2-3PO Live early in order
Yes,
to
because
make
we
that
have
appointment there.
a Zoom conflagration with my brother and his family and some cousins and Mom. But anyway, there's our musical tribute for the week. And now what do we talk about, oh host of most instead of ghost? Although in this show, it's a little of both.
We've got a couple of super chats that have come in here, so let's go ahead and honor those. Samuel Main here with the $3. Thank you so much. Even before the show started, let's give him the $3 with a super sticker. Got with a thumbs up. Thank you so much, Samuel Main.
Thank you,
You are
Sam.
very,
Every
very
time I
generous.
see your name, I don't know why I think of that lyric about the rain in Spain is mainly on the plain, and where's Samuel Main in Spain? In Spain, I don't know why that clicks with me whenever I see your name. But anyway, there you go.
And then Ruby Hoove with the super sticker, $3. Little hippo, next time, waving. Thank you so much for that. Very much appreciated.
And see, this one, if you want a song reference, could be Ruby, Don't Take Your Hoof to Town.
Oh.
But
that's a depressing song.
Yeah, it is. Never mind. Forget I said it. Thank you, Ruby.
Thank you, Ruby.
Don't let that suppress your generosity in the least, please.
No. That's a terrible song. There's a
Anyway.
Great show on I'm Corolla, actually, breaking that down. Very, very funny. But yes, so Lou, last night you were actually joining us for the watch party with Lauren that we were doing for charity.
I finally got to see the Acolyte last night.
Yep.
Which you can see of it. If they turn a light on, it probably would be more visible, which may or may not be a good thing. But it was pretty depressing.
It was pretty bad. Lou had never seen it before, nor did Lauren. So that was pretty fun. You guys want to check that out. I believe there's a replay.
Yeah, I'm sure there is. We don't
Pro's
let anything die on this channel or any of these channels. We recycle. We're all very environmental.
Oh, well, indeed, right?
Or at least mental.
Absolutely.
In our environment.
I'll say this, Lou, maybe, we should have interfaced a little bit here because, Jay Monroe, that's a good question right there. I think we topped out at what, around $2,500, isn't that right?
Yes, somewhere in that neighborhood, yeah, which is a great thing for a very good cause.
Awesome cause. Really, really cool stuff. I think that was a great idea to have performed. I know Pro, he's like, oh man, that was rough. That was brutal to watch those shows again. But because it was for a great cause, it definitely made it tolerable for sure. Man, but that show's
well, when Pro said I was there to give color commentary, I said, so far the only color I can think of is green. So
yeah.
Which could be taken as the raising money too, but I meant it in a more illness-related context. So
it is terrible. But we should have probably interfaced a little bit here, Lou, when talking about your Backlot jukebox, because I know you were a fan of a particular score and theme. Maybe we can go ahead and include it here as well.
All right. Which one was that?
The Last Genre Guys.
Ah, yes. This is the Genre Guys that's up new for people here. And for those of you who don't know how the Genre Guys work, the Genre Guys premieres as an exclusive for members only on the Pro channel. But then several weeks later, it comes here for free, so you can watch it twice. And Local Hero happens to have a marvelous, marvelous score by Mark Knopfler of Dire Straits. And, well, it's pretty great. Do you want to put that link up too? Or
I will.
Have
actually.
You got it? Yeah.
I do.
I knew you would.
All right here. But, right there. It's going to be in the
song called Going Home that is the theme to Local Hero. And if you haven't seen Local Hero, for goodness sakes, please watch our show and then watch the movie, or vice versa. But Local Hero is what we called a cozy movie. It is a warm, small, charming movie about an oil company that wants to develop a little bay up in wonderful Scotland, and finds out that there's more magic there than they expected. And I'll just leave it like that. And Burt Lancaster's in it, and Peter Riegert, and Peter Capaldi before his Doctor Who days, and lots of good people. So go watch that. It's good.
Absolutely
certified
fantastic
as
stuff.
Excellent. And our next Genre Guys on the member side will be recording tonight Get Shorty with a guest genre guy, because Lauren was totally wiped out by that experience and has no voice today. And so Nolan Thunder is going to join Hangry and I to do Get Shorty. So there you go.
Now, your takeaway from this film here? I remember hearing about it when it actually came out.
It's charming. It's cute. It's funny. It's a great watch. And I feel like it kind of just sort of ends without an ending. Now, they did do a sequel, but at the time they didn't plan one. So
Sure.
it's got a lot of fun Hollywood spoofy stuff in it, but to me, it never pays off, really. But that's just me, as you'll hear me expound on when that show goes up in a couple of days.
I can't look at John Travolta for a little while here after having seen images of him in Battlefield Earth.
Oh, God, yeah. Well, that's
so terrible. It's such a bad film. It
wasn't as bad as I thought it was going to be. I got to tell you, it was bad, but it wasn't as bad as I thought it was going to be.
Really?
Yeah, it was not quite as awful as I expected. So, but then there's no limits to my ability to imagine awfulness. I've seen too many movies that, what's the word? Excel in awfulness. So, anyway.
Well, it's about that time of the show here, folks, where we answer your questions right
Yes,
right
good.
here.
Let's do that.
We did not have many people actually email us. So I'm going to go ahead and put that email on the screen again. Push that out. If you would like to go ahead and get your questions answered, please go ahead. Email us at t3ponline@yahoo.com or during the show right
ask
now,
them in
go
the
ahead and put it
chat.
in the chat. Yeah,
Absolutely.
exactly. Indeed. And let's see here. We'll feature a couple of comments. Battlefield Earth was condensed to a small movie from a 1,000-page book and gets a bad rap because of
L. Ron Hubbard.
L. Ron, yes, L. Ron.
Yeah. The author of said 1,000-page book, which automatically gives him a bad rap from me, because if you can't say it in a few hundred more ain't going to make it any better. They just
but you got a world build. You got a world build. Okay. I don't know if it.
Tell it to Heinlein and Arthur Clarke and Ray Bradbury and everybody else who knows how. So, not
Indeed.
for me, you don't. Got
Tough
a bad
stuff.
rap because it's bad. Matter Hatter. It's just bad. It's just really bad.
It's not good. It's not good. It's not good. This is some
Culture,
tough.
you're late, but better late than never.
Yes, absolutely. I don't consider him ever late. I think he shows up always
In
when
the
he
nick
should.
of time. Fine old movie tradition.
Indeed. Let's see here. I keep
Yes.
imagining if Rachel Zegler was in the same time period. This from Equus Heart right here, talking about our conversation about the golden age of Hollywood and the Star Machine.
What's more
Working under those
likely is
contracts.
that very early in the process, they would have realized she's incapable of keeping her mouth shut and said, bye. They were pretty
Yes.
shrewd judges of that kind of character in those days. Not that they didn't have their mistakes or their dissolutions in midstream of the star system, but they knew what they were doing. You know, they were creating a product. It was an assembly line.
Yes, an assembly line that had to work with such stunning efficiency, because you had to produce, hundreds of films.
Well, and even within the fact that they were making so many movies, A's and B's and what have you, when you read this, you find out that when they decided they liked Tyrone Power, for example, in the first year he made 5 movies. And they specifically made 3 where he was there basically to look good and be attractive and be a sex bomb for the female audience, and 2 others where he was there to kind of stretch his legs and be in a costume drama and a So they were basically saying, we'll make these 5 and see which one does the best, and then we'll make 50 more like that. So that's what they did. But to do 5 in a year is a lot of work. But when you're on the clock every morning from 9 to 5 or whatever it is, which wasn't, it was a lot longer than that. 6 days a week in those days. So, and on the 7th day, they did not rest exactly. So,
yes. Jeanine talked about that. Jeanine talked about how you would put out a movie just to kind of see what took off, what didn't, and then if something did take off, obviously you he did it 20 times until it, utterly
Yeah,
collapsed and
yeah,
he moved on.
yeah.
That's a real interesting way of moving. But remember, like the golden age of MGM, for example, what they released like 50, 60 movies a year or something, which is more than one a week.
Yeah,
Which is
yeah.
insane.
Well, at times 6, 8 major studios, and throw in Disney and throw in short subjects and newsreels and all the other stuff they did, the cartoons. Matt B, yes, of course I've seen Planes, Trains, and Automobiles, and that would be a good one, but we thought about doing it a little late, so maybe next year we'll do that as our Thanksgiving movie on the Genre Guys. And anyway, catching up.
Absolutely.
Let's see. Culture, you're here? Say something. Ask a question. Be an answer. Something.
Yes. I know I have seen Planes, Trains, and Automobiles as well. Great Thanksgiving movie. Probably should have a Thanksgiving themed show. Interesting. Go ahead and put that down. Maybe, as Lou said, maybe this year, maybe next year for both us and the Genre Guys. Very interesting stuff, indeed. Man, it's just kind of fascinating how the golden age used to work and used to operate and used to function. Just so different from today.
Well, again, the economics,
for sure.
the economics dictated the rest of it because they were different. They were seriously different. But
Yes. They weren't producing acolytes for, gobs of money that would never make it back. It's an interesting way of working. One would say, keeping the fiduciary duty of shareholders in perspective there.
yeah, well, you see, the world is wired. Vash, our favorite pizza outfit, just sent me a commercial in my email. So I'm just saying, they know I'm talking to you, and they say, "Hey, by the way, have a pizza."
Well, that's something. Let's see here. The major news, I guess, going on right now is definitely this transformational thing going on in media and entertainment. We just heard about Comcast spinning off MSNBC,
Which I only suggested would happen, a year ago?
It's true.
I was prescient on that one.
Right, absolutely.
And I showed somebody, I guess I shared it with Pro, but there's a clip of Bill O'Reilly analyzing all that. And he's on with Cuomo and what's his name? Anyway. And he's telling him, why they're doing it? They said, well, because of the finance. And I said, no, they don't want that hate associated with their brand. And that's the bottom line. That is the bottom line. I thought it was interesting to see that because they're trying to cut corners, they told Rachel Maddow that she's going to have to take a $5 million pay cut, which would sound like a lot of money if she wasn't getting 25 instead of 30 through that to do one show a week. Not even 5 nights, but one show. And I guess if they got rid of her, they'd lose another 40% of the audience that likes her, and so they keep her. But
that's such a crazy thing. Definitely a transformation from the golden age of Hollywood and now entertainment media as a whole.
Well, and then look at The View, where Sunny Hostin got very angry because they forced her to read some legal disclaimers after she said something.
Right.
Everybody got into that, but nobody made the point that I did, or at least not first. I claim my little corner of the sky. Reference, know the reference, mentioned for free prize. The idea that somebody would say something on a political or social talk show and have a lawyer from the company want them to give a cover, a disclaimer, whatever, that's one thing. The idea that they have somebody watching it in real time and saying, before there's a commercial, read this or else, that they're being babysat that closely shows you the tension and the terror that must exist around there. So,
The
hello,
scrutiny of
Pro. Look who's here. The boss.
Hello
the
there,
man,
Pro.
The big enchilada. Yeah, Josh, it's very good pizza, believe me. And Pro knows it too, because I catered this particular brand of pizza to our gathering a while back. So I was just saying, Pro, that here I am with Vash, and my email is suddenly full of ads from that certain pizza company. So somehow they know.
Absolutely.
Anyway.
But
Well, come on, folks out there. You must have some old Hollywood queries to put before me.
absolutely, please go ahead, bring them out. We need all the
Notice
questions we
that
can
was
possibly get.
Query, not a spelling you might have misheard. Because there's a lot of those too.
I think YouTube understood up until that that correction. Very, very interesting. I look at a situation like this where we're seeing Comcast spin stuff off. You mentioned the View and the scrutiny that a program like that might be under, because, well, I mean, Bob Iger was thinking about doing the same thing, right? He was thinking about spinning off ABC. Still might.
Yeah,
And
well, he
so-
mentioned it, a little over a year ago, and then
Right.
got stomped on by somebody because he said, well, I didn't mean right away.
Yes.
Well,
yes. Not
is
this
right
moment.
away.
No, it's definitely Disney core. Come on, let's not think about this inevitable.
Next week on The
thing that might
View,
happen.
Rachel Zegler tells you why Snow White is a wonderful movie. Film at 11.
Are there? Do you think for these entertainment companies, this is kind of like, I don't know, the film industry losing distribution via their theaters?
No,
There's some
because it's
parallels there.
self-inflicted. The film industry fought tooth and nail not to have it happen. But the fact is, the reason they kept saying, well, linear is dead, linear is dying, they can say it's because of that, not because of politics.
Yes.
But if anybody believes them, I have some swampland in Orlando I'd like to sell you for a new theme park called, I don't know. I can't come up with the punchline. Sorry.
Gatorland 2.0.
There you go. The whole sordid story.
Yes.
Gatorland.
I look at this kind of stuff and I just think, wow, we are really seeing a very interesting time in history. And this is not to say that people are not interested in the news or are not interested in keeping up with all the things going on to the degree that maybe these linear broadcast networks would actually provide. It's interesting because if we we've covered this multiple times before, but it's very much worth stating again that you see something like this, for example, TV ratings election night viewings drop off sharply. By the Hollywood Reporter, it was 42.29 million viewers across 18 cable and broadcast networks from the 7 to 11 p.m. slot right there, keeping up with election coverage on November 5th, and that's down from 56.92 million viewers. So where did they actually end up going?
The first question you have to ask about that is,
please,
what happened during those 4 hours? Because considering the beginning of it is all the East Coast polls where there's a lot of population closing.
Right.
And so people could have been saying, well, I kind of guess which way the president's going to go, but I want to know who wins the Senate and the House. And then you get into the lower population states. And by the time you get to the West Coast, it's like, I don't have any doubt who's going to win out there. So the pattern of, did advertisers get paid more for the first hour than they did the last hour in the return of people? So I don't know. That's all for the numbers, guys.
Absolutely.
I'm a genre guy, not a number guy. But
that's a good point right there. But no, a lot of them went to YouTube. YouTube reporting that they had 45 million people. That's, by the way, more than the 42 million people overall watching
Yeah, but it doesn't
broadcasting
answer
network
the question,
television.
did they go to YouTube to watch politics, or did they go there to watch that great person who's inside the transformer at Universal telling people to go to heck?
That's
Uh,
true.
so, they needed a break from it.
It
We all know the damn
does.
election season runs too long for anybody's
Oh, it's way too long.
but its ability. And so,
I guess YouTube did say that it was U.S. watched election related content. So that's what they're attributing it to. Obviously, we're taking YouTube's word for that if it is
they
indeed
would
coming from
know,
them.
but
And then you have 1 in 5 Americans get their news from social media influencers. And that was obviously right before Comcast says, yeah, we're going to go ahead and spin these things off. I bring all this up to say that, I mean, this industry is definitely moving in a direction. I'm not sure where it's necessarily going to be at the end of the day, but it's always changing. It's always transforming. That's interesting because Jeanine actually said something to that effect on on the podcast appearance that she made, talking about the Star Machine. That the industry is always changing. It's always transforming, and it's these studio executives and everybody else trying to keep up with it.
well, now considering that, if you include in those YouTube or other influencers, as they call people,
Mhm.
who have you got in there? You've got Megyn Kelly, who has a huge following. You've got
Massive.
Bill O'Reilly. You've got
Yep.
all these people that started in regular network news and moved
Yep.
off. So,
Yeah. And some up and comers who have never really been associated with news content before, now finding a niche within that space and really doing something there.
but not to the degree that the big people are, not to the degree that
No.
the Tucker Carlsons and the Megyn Kellys are.
Absolutely.
Because if they're brand new, they have yet to form a lasting trust with the audience.
Right.
So,
Yep. And that's kind of what we've been seeing almost like with Hollywood as well. You have this kind of niche filmmaking where things aren't necessarily crafted to the largest audience that possibly can be included. You have stuff like, oh, I don't know. You have content being created that only satisfies a particular subset of the audience. And I don't know if that reflects people have this idea of a unified culture in which we all experience things together, and
doesn't exist
maybe
anymore. Doesn't exist anymore. They used to
Exactly.
say back in radio days when Amos and Andy was the most popular show on radio,
Mhm.
that since we had no air conditioning in those days and people had to keep their windows open in the summertime to keep the house coolish, you could walk down any street in America and never miss a moment of the show because you would hear it coming out the windows of every house on the street, all in sync and all the same program. That doesn't happen anymore.
Yeah, that's shared
What do I think
experience.
really happened? What really happened is bad things. Fatty Arbuckle and Virginia Rapp. What happened was, whether others were involved or not is a good question, because they managed to sort of limit the bleeding to just getting Fatty out of business. So that's what I think, Julian, is that there may have been a lot more to it, but they acted quickly to isolate it from everybody else in town. And it
Yeah,
wasn't the
great.
best or the worst event in the history of the town, but it was the one that happened then. So
I'll
you
read
had to have
that.
a sacrificial something to throw to the I mean, otherwise it's like, well, they're all like that, ban them all, so
Let me go read that super chat here for the people that are listening and not
yes,
watching.
sorry.
Jillian N999, thank you so much, very much for the $10. Very much appreciate it. Lurking as I do tasks, and this popped into my head. What do you think really happened with regard to the Fatty Arbuckle Virginia Rap matter? Thank you both. Fascinating discussion. For our viewers who might not know what happened
There was a
Lou.
wild party, and he was accused of violating her with a soda bottle, among other things.
Right.
And there was a great hue and cry about the evil immorality of Hollywood. And no one person ever represented Hollywood, but in that case, the media of that time had their target and they went for it. So
it's astounding the public perception that's cast by some of these.
Well, look at Amber Heard and
Yeah.
Kevin Spacey and all the
Yep.
rest of these things. So it's not unusual now, as opposed to then, that such scandal stories flare up.
Yeah. Or like, I don't know, let's say in the contemporary modern setting, maybe a Matt Gaetz or something like that, right? Where you have allegations put out there, you might have.
Yeah, but you look at that one and you say, we don't want to get so political, do we? I mean,
No, we don't. What I'm just
all I'm going to say was, if the Department
media.
of Justice, being run by the party that hates his guts, couldn't find enough evidence to take him to trial, chances are there wasn't any there.
Sure.
They would have if they could have. And I'll just leave it.
But the perception, though, is out there. That's kind of my larger point is.
But that's the point, is that the political people deal in innuendo and not in fact. So
right.
They could say all kinds of things. Imagine what they would say about George Washington if he was around today. That's a dirty old man with wooden teeth. Cherry pie, give me a break. What kind of a story does he think we'll buy from that old geezer?
Yes.
And he wasn't that great a general after all. He was just basically freezing his army at Valley Forge, waiting for something, anything.
I also think it's interesting the effect. So you can, let's say you sensationalize and you cast doubt, or you run with a story that may not be true or may not be factual or whatever. If that's emanating from the mainstream media, for example, it's interesting what happens to the level of trust there between the viewer and that entity. And I think something like this, for example, right? The wrap here: MSNBC viewership drops by half in days after Trump victory. We didn't just
because
see
once
this.
it's confirmed, we've had nothing but politics in our face. I don't know if that's particularly a verdict on MSNBC or CNN, as much as it's a verdict on, all right, enough already, the election's over. So there's a certain amount of
I think a lot of it has to
fatigue
do with that,
involved.
yes. But there's a subset of that where people are like, you know what, you guys necessarily weren't honest with how this election might have unfolded. And now that we've seen it unfold, it's like now we have a little bit of trust issues. I bring that up because we actually saw some YouTube channels who were definitely of a persuasion that believed a certain outcome would actually happen with the election. And people withdrew to great extent. They ended their subscribers. They even ended their memberships in some cases. And so I just think, like, you definitely have a responsibility when you're in media to develop and preserve.
Well, if your
trust.
business is predicting the results, you better get it right more often than you get it wrong.
That's true.
Or else you're not of any use to anybody if that's what they're going there for. If your interest is in commenting on the passing scene, that's a different story. But anyway, yeah, there you go. Low trust is quite expensive, says
Yes.
him in school for extra attention.
I think it's a great quote.
There you go.
Man.
I tend to quote great political philosophers, and Ringo said it all. I don't ask for much. I only want trust, and it don't come easy.
Absolutely. It's true. I would say if you're a smaller person in the space, that trust.
You're gonna
is
sing the
reputation,
blues. You
that
got to
name.
pay your dues, and it don't come easy.
Yep. That reputation is maybe all you have, so it's unbelievably important. But it does get the big guys too. Eventually, I would say. It's just a really kind of a fascinating thing that we're seeing.
I don't know about anybody else, but there have been channels that I've really liked and turned on because I discovered them not to be ethical. Not political channels necessarily, just personally, and I'm not going to go into the whole story of what made me think that. But I gave up totally on the Food Network because when they started playing games with some of these competitions, I said, not for me. Yeah, smash the like by all means if you like this, and if you don't, it's your fault. You didn't give us any questions. Shame on you.
No, you're totally fine.
We're not usually this contemporary on this show. We like to harken back to those thrilling days of yesteryear. But hey, I guess everybody is in post-election mode to some degree. But you know, I like I said, I don't ask for much. I only want trust, and you know, it don't come easy.
Good thing.
How long would a typical movie be exhibited? Now that's a real interesting question, Amnuk. Typically, when? You mean nowadays or back then? I do know quite a bit about Forrest Ackerman, Mad Hatter, but let me get back to this previous one first. You have to understand, and I've mentioned this on some of the other shows on the channels, but it's worth repeating. When you hear people say, well, as a rule of thumb, whatever number you hear it makes at the box office goes about 50-50 between the studio and the theaters in America. That's not really true. And the reason it's not really true is that's the way the numbers work if it runs a decent length, because the split is very much in favor of the studio the first couple weeks to reward them, in theory, for their effort in promoting it. And therefore, as time goes on, it starts to shift until it gets to the point where the theaters are making more than the studio after several weeks. What's wrong with that equation? Most of them don't make it several weeks. So the theaters are hurting because they're making a bet on a proposition that isn't happening in a lot of cases. So the longer it lasts, which is partly a function of how popular it is, but partly a function of how popular the one that wants to replace it is, especially when it comes to the large format theaters, you know, the IMAXs and things, because there are fewer of them, their tickets are more expensive, and things are locked into opening in them the week they open, whether the other show has gotten out of the way or not.
Right.
So
what's interesting too about that whole equation is we've seen like these films make it to digital platforms pretty early on in their runs, which obviously is going to undercut the theaters who stand the most to lose in the game from the dynamics of such a windowing practice.
Well, but again, that's part of the contract. They tell them we need the exclusive for X amount of time,
right?
And they're giving that for less and less time these days because they want the ability, especially if the same studio, for example, has two big screen IMAX blockbuster epics opening within a couple of weeks of each other. They know that their second movie is going to knock their first movie out of those theaters. So they want the ability to make it back maybe from pay-per-view or streaming. So, and then there's the question, of course, which we always ask around here, of what's the goal? Is the goal how many tickets you sold, or is the goal how many subscriptions to the streaming service you sold and how many of them stuck around? So the scorecards are a little harder to read these days because they tend to fluctuate.
I want to bring up this one last thing before getting to the Matter Hatter's question right here. I thought this was very interesting. I saw this on Twitter. Discussing Film here has that John Watts says that he canceled the Wolves sequel after Apple took away the first film's theatrical release and moved it straight to streaming. Quote, I quietly returned the money that they gave me for the sequel. Apple didn't cancel the Wolves sequel. I did because I no longer trusted them as a creative partner. It's interesting.
Well, la-di-da. Remember what I said about the star system when we were talking earlier about the book that I recommended to everybody?
Yes.
About how people who were sensible knew they were literally selling themselves in return for money. Well, he should know better too. Let me give you an example. Years and years and years and years ago, in one of my many representative modes, I was the West Coast representative for the Dramatists Guild. Now, the Dramatists Guild, unlike the Writers Guild, represents both playwrights and both composers and book writers and lyricists for musicals to play on the stage. Well, a very famous and expert and wonderful playwright came out to do one of our, we do an event twice a year with 2 or 3 nights of interviewing famous folks. And he came out, and a play of his had been made into a TV show. It lasted, I think, about a season or 2. And I'm not going to mention his name or which show because there's no point in doing that. But he came out and explained that after the TV show had been in production for a couple of weeks, he came out from New York to kind of say hi and check in. And he found that there were 13 writers on the staff, none of whom he knew, none of whom he'd approved of, none of whom he had ever auditioned, so to speak, and all of whom were writing his characters for TV. And he felt outraged and offended because, of course, in the theater, nobody writes your stuff but you, and it's yours by copyright. And I sat there thinking, for a very smart man, you sure had a lousy agent if that bothers you, that didn't explain it to you. That's the nature of the beast. So don't get mad because you got a bad deal. Get mad at the person who got you the bad deal and get a better one next time, was my attitude. But so that's kind of what I feel about this. And frankly, it may very well be, and I am not predicting because I really don't know the numbers of the people, but in a year from now, if Wicked 2, The Wrath of whatever her name is, doesn't do well, this idea of guaranteeing 2 movies up front will probably fade from the scene because nobody wants to be stuck with that guarantee.
When it's just so, I guess it's incredibly fascinating. Yes, definitely working out your contract deal so that something like this doesn't happen. We do see stuff like, I don't know what happened with Scarlett Johansson or even Christopher Nolan when Warner Brothers dedicated their entire slate for 2021 to be released both in theatrical and streaming at the same time. You know, it really upended the entire industry. That's why Christopher Nolan left Warner Brothers and his relationship that he shared with them for quite so long, and did work with Universal, and that's where we get Oppenheimer and the rest of the, I guess, Christopher Nolan's stuff.
Kind of interesting, isn't it? It's kind of interesting that both Chris Nolan and J. Rowling found that Universal was willing to commit to a creator in a way that other studios wouldn't.
That's interesting.
Because it tells people who are protective of their property that that's where you should go first if you want a deal like that, because they have the precedent of having done it. I've told the story, maybe here, maybe not, but a friend of mine wrote a really wonderful fantasy novel, and it got bought by Disney. And the Disney guys came to him and they said, "We like your book. We love it. We'll probably make a movie out of it. We want to buy the rights in case we decide to. But there's only one thing, the title." And his title was a very kind of longish, obscure-ish quote from things people didn't know, esoteric.
Yeah.
And the Disney guy said, "Look, we're the Walt Disney Company, and if we make a movie about a pretty woman, we call it Pretty Woman. And if we make a movie about," and he went through all, he says, we don't do that kind of arcane titling. And this guy said, "It's a good thing you didn't make Rain Man because you probably would have called it My Brother the Retard." So there you go. So, and they never made a movie, and he got paid anyway, and I guess that was fine.
Such an interesting Hollywood story, for sure.
Do I know anything about Forrest? Of course, I read his magazines forever. You mentioned Ray Bradbury, he said, but Forrest Ackerman, Famous Monsters of Filmland was his main outlet. And he was the guy who did the magazine that was about the monsters. He was kind of a monster-centric version of Film Threat, if I'm not insulting either side to say that. So he was a character, and he, because he was doing monsters, it was lots of pictures of him posing with Frankenstein or him posing with Dracula or whatever. I bet you can pull up his pic somewhere, which is what I'm looking for.
Please, what's the spelling? I'm sorry.
Forrest J. Ackerman, Ackerman, and he had these kind of wild glasses and a mustache, and he was really prominent advocate of the Esperanto language. I didn't know that. So yeah, okay. So he was
kind of an early photo of him.
He was a character. He was a real character, or at least he presented himself to the world as a character. Whether he really was is anybody's guess. But those were the days. He would have had he was the Dr. Demento of monster movies and science fiction movies. He would have had a hell of a website had he been around that long. But
interesting. Matterhatter says kind of the first cosplayer. That's an interesting idea.
Well, yeah, to some degree. But anyway, he was quite a character, that's for sure. Yes, he had a huge collection of things, like original prosthetic pieces for movies, and it wasn't really a museum in the sense that it was open to anybody, but that line from the Addams Family about their house is a museum for people who come to see him. Well, that's kind of what he had. I have no idea if he had a regular house behind all that was normal, and if that wasn't just for show, because everything he did was for show. He was
oh man, a performer to the very end, it would seem.
Yeah. Well, anyway, that's who Forrest Ackerman was. But
that's cool. That's some really interesting imagery right there. We will.
Somebody's asking a lot of questions all of a sudden, which is nice.
Yes.
Tanya Marshall Liu, does an actor get full pay if a movie bombs if there's something in their contracts regarding pay? Well, if they're going to get a percentage of its profits, and it has none, obviously they don't get that. But the upfront stuff is theirs. So that's why a lot of people said, I'd rather get paid now than take a chance on later. Either way, the contract will include clauses about how much publicity and stuff that they're supposed to do for a film. So
that was the interesting about Scarlett Johansson is, a lot of her pay was incumbent on how well it would actually do with theaters. And well, when you simultaneously release that, maybe in theaters as well as on Disney Plus, obviously that's not taking that into account.
She actually took action and got paid some kind of way. They settled that privately. They did change Basil of Baker Street to The Great Mouse Detective. Yeah, well, because one was the book it was from and one was the movie, and I actually own some cells from that, which I'm very proud of. That I picked up when they were peddling cells at Disneyland one day, and surprise, let out something good. Anyway,
great.
Yeah.
A couple things on that. Great Mouse Detective, one of the first instances of CGI actually used in an animated film. Very, very cool. And yeah, the name was changed not only to the what Lou was saying, but also too, that was also when the guard was changing as well. That's when the Michael Eisner guys came in.
And that's your basic what that story I told tells, which is Basil of Baker Street. You'd have to know that Baker Street implied Sherlock Holmes, but the Great Mouse Detective, well, that says it all. And there's a thing here about Ray Bradbury, who I knew casually, and Forey didn't discover him. He was discovered by the world for his talent. Ray started writing as a kid and never stopped and kept selling. And anyway, there he is. Well, that was when he was working on Epcot. He was very involved in Spaceship Earth.
So cool. And he was good friends with Walt Disney. I'm guessing they talked about the future because Walt Disney was I mean, he had a foot in the past, but he definitely had a foot in the future. He was very almost obsessed. about modern conveniences and how the world would change due to transportation, communication, and all those things that were later enveloped into Epcot.
Yes, yes. Uh, I've told that Ray Bradbury story, haven't I?
I don't think so.
Oh, well, when I was in high school at wonderful Beverly Hills High School, we were not rich, but we moved into the poor part of Beverly Hills for the schools, and the schools were spectacular. And one part of that school system was that our English teacher, who was the advanced placement English guy, um, decided to do something in addition to the regular curriculum, which was he asked everybody in the class to pick their favorite book that was not part of the curriculum and teach it to the class, which was kind of interesting. And we once a week would meet at somebody's house to talk about the book that we would all read in addition. We took on the responsibility of reading the book. And one week it happened to be, well, I don't know if I should mention everybody's name, so I won't. But one of the girls in the class' father knew Ray, and it was one of his books, and she got him to come to the class. So where better could you learn about something than from the guy that wrote it? And I was always a big fan and was thrilled that he was going to be there. But Ray had a kind of in a good way, not in a stupid way, but in a good way, a childlike innocence about some of the things he said that was taken wrongly by a lot of people. And in this case, because the girl from the class was just this obsessive, nice lady, but she's just one of those people that tries too hard. She found some book that had been put out called Writers on Writing, I think it was. And one of the 12 or 14 different famous writers who had contributed a chapter of them talking about the art and craft of writing was Ray Bradbury. And so she started off, she was trying to be the Tom Snyder or the William F. Buckley or the whatever of this interview. And she said, in 19 whatever it was, you wrote, and then she read about 4 paragraphs of this piece of his about writing. And she looked at him and said, what's your reaction to that today? Because it had been 15 years before. And Ray was just sitting there with this bemused smile on his face. And I'll never forget, he said, gee, did I write that? That's good. And my feeling was, man, good for you. You enjoy your stuff and you stick by it and whatever. But the reaction of 90% of my jerk class was, ooh, ego, ooh, gosh.
Oh, come on.
Oh, that was their reaction, absolutely. And so Ray and I got along, and the rest of them didn't exactly. And by the way, if you look at that model of Epcot behind him, it's a pretty early one, because if you look up from Spaceship Earth and you see that kind of round, tenty building there,
yep,
that is actually the American Adventure in its original form, and of course on the wrong side of the lagoon from where it wound up.
Right.
So
it was kind of like the U.S. was going to be the gateway to the world kind of thing.
Right, sure. So instead of being the goal of your voyages through the world to find the best thing.
Sure.
So, well, and look at the other differences. I mean, that's the land pavilion over on the left, and we know it really goes over here on the right.
On the right, yeah.
But anyway, they used to move these things around. We all know the story about Herbie Ryman and the castle at Disneyland when he knocked it over and he put it backwards. And Walt came in and said, what did you do? Oh, I like it better that way. And that's the way they built it. So
that's the way it is. Love that story.
Anyway.
Very cool stuff.
But,
for sure.
But that was Ray. He was for real. And no, Mad Hatter, he was not the first person who published Bradbury, not in the least. Bradbury was published in so many different magazines before him, and not just science fiction, but detective stories and all kinds of other things. So that's erroneous. And poor part of Beverly Hills, yes. When we moved there, it was the houses on the south side of Wilshire that were under $100,000. So I always tell people that you see all these time travel movies, that the only real good reason to build a time machine is go back and buy Beverly Hills or Southern California real estate. Because my folks bought that house for $82,500, and they sold it for $1,700,000. Same house from the 20s. I mean, it kept it up, but still, that's Hollywood. There's a museum in Malibu where you can see advertising for empty lots in Malibu for $200 a piece. People now buy houses under those lots for $14-15 million just to tear down the house and build another one. So time changes, but Southern California real estate is pretty strange.
Indeed. Does Equisart, does Disney still deal cells these days?
I don't think they do anymore.
Yeah,
they used to back in the original days. They had a store on Main Street that I have a friend who bought, original Mickey and Donald and all kinds of stuff from. I think he has a couple from Snow White. But when I bought those from Great Mouse Detective, there's one of Basil and the little girl mouse swinging through the gears of Big Ben, and there's another set of Ratigan doing his thing. And why I bought them was because they were intact sets of like 3, 4, 5 cells that made up the scene, all stuck together in the right order. So anyway, there you go.
That's great. That's absolutely fantastic. I don't think they deal in cells anymore because they like to do restorations for future copies or future releases and so forth. And sometimes you need those cells.
Plus with digital animation,
they don't actually produce cells.
Right.
Good point.
The ink and paint department is no longer using ink or paint. Anyway.
Ever since Caps. Ooh, very interesting. Well, I think that just about does it. We got the lowdown on genre guys earlier, so no need to. I think people
like I
understand.
Tonight we'll be doing, and Local Hero is on here, and we have lots of movies ahead of us on genre guys. We are going to do, as I say, Lauren's voice gave out from last night's ordeal. But he's going to do one with us on the original, the one and only Star Wars. And my approach to that will be, this was not done to start a franchise, a genre, a series, a huge machine that turned out movies and TV shows and books and records. And it was just a movie, gang. I remember going opening day at the Chinese Theater because my friends in film school had heard something, that this might be a neat movie. And so we all went up there for opening day. And as much as they'd like to tell you now that it was a chapter in a series and whatever, it was made to be a kind of a joke on the old serials that it was a story in the middle of a larger story, but they never told you the other story. And I don't think he had any vision of it at that time, except brief moments. So where it came from is another story, but how it made it on its own. And I will tell this on the Genre Guys too, so you'll hear it again. Mm-hmm. When 20th Century Fox, after all the other majors had turned it down, decided to finance Star Wars. Remember, they didn't own it. They owned the distribution rights. Lucas smartly retained the ownership. But when Fox put that movie out, just another movie, I mean, they liked it. They thought it would do well, but they put it out, didn't give it special advertising budgets or special promotion. And it did so well that within something like 2 months, was the story I heard, Star Wars had paid the entire nut on the entire 20th Century Fox Film Corporation. Now, do you understand what that means? That means if they had an office rented in Uruguay, it was paid for. That means if you bought a sandwich in the commissary for $12, it was 100% profit. It means they had lots of cash. And what did they do? Did they put it in more movies? They bought a Coca-Cola bottler, and they bought the golf course in Big Sur. What you call it? Why can't I think of the name of the golf course? But Pebble Beach. So, and why do they buy legitimate businesses like those? Because all the executives were being paid in stock options, And Wall Street was always suspicious of movie companies as far as stock was concerned
Right.
because they thought their accounting was iffy. So they tried
So
to
you
make
did-
it a more legitimate company by buying it out of the movie business, if you will. So that shows
Diversify
you
your
the strange
investments.
stuff.
It'll be
Yeah,
fun.
exactly. So
Now,
yeah.
are you guys watching the unaltered version or just whatever
you mean all those changes that they made when they made it A New Hope and all that?
Yeah,
Well,
yeah.
Did you
the
show
special
him?
edition?
Did you show him my thumbnail? I forget if I sent it to you. Did I? Wait a minute.
No.
Well, here's the thumbnail I made for that when we do it, and you won't see it right away because that's when we're going to kind of put in the archives for times like this when somebody's either traveling or unavailable. We're
Sure.
going to do Get Shorty with, as I said, Nolan Thunder filling in, which will be great. But let me see if I can find this. Come on, I know you're in there somewhere. I can hear you breathing, picture. I applied a little Yiddish to the original. Not much. I think it's enough for everybody here to get. Come on. Everything's running slow as usual. I don't know what it is about lately, but when I've got this wonderful program of ours, here we go, getting there. And come on. I have a very fast computer with a very fast connection that in these instances decides to be slow. Okay, here we go. Let's see. Copy. Come on, copy. You can do it. Anyway, I'm going to send it to you in the other place so that you can do it easily. If it ever copies, I'm waiting with a stupid hourglass like in the old. That's why I bought PC instead of Macs, because I hated those stupid hourglasses. Back in the original days of the first Macintoshes, you'd sit there for days because since the graphic system was about addressing every pixel on the screen, not just the white and black ones, if you will. Here we go. Let's see. Come on. Well, I'll get it to you anyway, and you'll get it in there sometime. But no, I went ahead. I may have the disc somewhere, but I went ahead and rented it and got. Was that scene with Jabba the Hutt inserted for the second version?
Yes, that was.
That's what I
for the
thought. I
special
sat there
edition.
saying, I don't remember this, but
I'll talk to Lauren to see what he has planned there because he might be able to help out facilitate the production of that.
he knows all that stuff, and I think it's
indeed.
great that he's that obsessive, but I'm not.
Well, I can't wait. I think that's going to be really, really cool for the viewers and listeners. That's going to be a lot of fun. Also, Get Shorty coming out here. Ooh, good stuff. And on this program, actually, I probably should have looked this up in advance, but I did not. Let's see here.
There.
We have Undefeated with John Wayne.
A wonderful, wonderful movie. But then we don't have too many stickers once in a while. But no, The Undefeated is kind of interesting because it's Rock and John as the Union and the South all fighting crooked Mexicans and Frenchmen. So I think that's a nice unifying theme.
Oh, indeed. So if you haven't yet subscribed yet, please subscribe for all the genre guys that you can possibly get your hands on.
All right, it's in your slackaroo there, the thumb. Let's see.
We got it in here, huh? Let's see if we can refresh, get that. Hasn't come in
I added
yet.
a little touch of Yiddishikoff to the whole idea, and maybe people will get it, maybe people won't. Kof literally means head, and so Yiddish head means a skeptically humorous Jewish perspective on things, let's say. And I know you got it because I see it there. So
really, because I'm not
under plain old Vash in the Oh wait, it's sitting there, but I didn't push the little green arrow. Hang on. There you go.
There we go. That's the one. Oh, yes. Absolutely. That's great. Some hope new.
Some hope. No. Anyway.
Oh, man. Brings us back to a better time. So
In a
if
galaxy
you want
far,
to,
far away from this one, that's for sure.
Yes, that's for sure. But if you want to see stuff like this as soon as the genre guys are released, head over to the WWE Pro YouTube channel, become a member. You can see it as soon as they are put out. Or
And
if
you get
wanna
other
go ahead and
goodies
wait,
too. I didn't only
Yes.
that, but yeah.
Yes, a whole like for example, if you remember, you got to register for the stream that Culture put on for the Acolyte viewing party with Lauren and everything like that. That was very cool. So you get a wide variety of great things attached to that membership. Not only the genre guys, but
Oh,
so
and it
much.
occurs to me. Wait a minute. Let's see here. Come on. This statement is also the subject of one of my newer thumbnails for the movie Airplane, which we're going to do sometime soon. Hang on. Well, I shouldn't promise what I don't know is already done because it's taken for days here. But that's life. I remember. I remember
Indeed.
Prince Birdseye, but that's another story. Let's hear it. Copy, go here,
I think you
go
can
there.
drag stuff in, by the way.
There, wait
That
a minute.
helps.
Here we go. Here's what we've been doing all this time, and it happens to symbolize my thumbnail for Airplane.
Oh, that's a great one.
Share it
Oh, that's
with the
fantastic.
troops, for goodness sakes. There you go.
That's great. That's absolutely fantastic. I love that. Yes, shameless plugs indeed. Which, by the way, if you want to go ahead and see the genre guys after they are put out on the Pro Show, or you want to go ahead and see more of us here at Hollywood Backlot with Lou and You, or T3PO Live, great show, fantastic show, awesome stuff. Sound a little bit like the 45 there. That was funny. Well, then you have to subscribe. So hit the subscribe button. If you haven't hit the subscribe button yet, hit the like button. If you haven't hit the like button yet, if you don't like us, well, yeah, I guess you can hit the dislike as well. But hey, you know
Is
what?
there a dislike anymore? I didn't think they kept that somehow.
There is, but I guess it ranges from channel to channel. But there is, it just doesn't show up. Which
Oh, I see. Well, they should. If you really dislike us, tell all your friends because they'll probably not. They might say,
Yes.
if it's that bad, let me go look. It's kind of what we call the Acolyte ratings complex.
That's it.
Hey, just to show you that we don't stick to classic stodgy movies, here's this next one for you,
Yep.
Vash.
Yep. Ringo Starr. One Ringo to rule them all.
Not
Right
if Raquel has anything to say about it. But,
Y'all go over the entire genre. Well, again, I guess that's
yes, that's
fair
the
point.
Raquel Welch with a whip genre. There is a limited genre there, but anyway.
You've
But
also
that is, of
covered
course,
some
The
Bollywood
Magic
films.
Christian, which is one of the funniest, strangest, wonderfulest movies you've never seen. And if you've never seen it, you should watch it. And our overall theme song, with all of these is Buy the Damn Discs. Because who knows what they'll do in the future to change things or make things politically correct. God,
Buy
so
the
many
discs.
good
Support
movies.
physical media. Yeah.
I'm looking at all
Just
the
like
ones
Christopher
that
Nolan
come,
said, they can't take it away from you.
right? No, they can't take that away from me.
The only problem is if they take away the players. That's the tough thing about that. But that's a whole conversation for another time, which I'm guessing we'll have on here eventually. So if you want to go ahead and keep in the loop on there, hit the subscribe button. Thank you so much for joining us for our show today. And we will see you all on T3PO. We might actually move the show slightly this week in order to accommodate for Thanksgiving. But hey, you know what? If you're subscribed, you'll know exactly when we go live. You won't miss anything out. So please go ahead and do that. And we will see you all later. Take care. All.
Adios, muchachos.